Welcome back to the new LBP speedrunning guide. Now that we've covered all of the basic tricks you'll need to know to run the game, we're now going to start going through each level and explaining how to do them all in their own separate videos. If you haven't watched the basic tricks guide yet, we highly recommend that you stop watching this video and go watch that one. There'll be a lot that won't make sense in this video unless you watch it, so we'll link that in the description. With that out of the way, let's get started with the first level, the introduction. Before you start the run, make sure you check a couple of things. Make sure you're on a clean save file. If this is your first time running a PS3 game, you should create a separate PS3 profile so you don't have to delete your main save file. If you already have a speedrunning account and you have a save file on it, you'll want to delete it. Before opening the game, make sure you're signed out of PSN and that your control number is set to 1. You'll see why in a bit. Timing will start on first input. This doesn't count pausing and restarting the level though. You can also stop the narrator from talking just by restarting the level while he's talking, which helps for some audio cues later on. Now, because of the rules of this category, we aren't actually required to finish any levels but the final one, as the main objective is just to defeat the collector starting from a new save file. The introduction is the only level we aren't going to be finishing, as there's a skip that lets us go straight to the next level by quitting to the pod. If this is a new save file, which it should be, the game doesn't give you any open option to quit to the pod. But if you've played this game before, you'll probably know that getting a game over presents you with a dialogue to restart or return to the pod. So we're going to have to get that menu up so we can exit the level early. Since the introduction level is pretty much designed to not kill you, we'll have to lose lives another way. The way the game handles lives is that a life will be taken from the checkpoint only if the player spawning has already been spawned in the level previously. So what we're going to do is spawn a new sack person, then another, and so on, until all of the lives have fully depleted. Something important to know is that the player that opens the game is always set to the host. They'll keep the role even if they despawn, and they will automatically be spawned next if they aren't present in the game. Then guests will follow. Here's what the skip is based around. You're able to very easily spawn additional sack people by holding in the PS button on your controller to bring up the settings menu, going into controller settings, and simply changing your controller number, returning to the game, and selecting guest. When a character doesn't have a controller connected to them, they'll despawn after 10 seconds. It's a good idea to just go through and spawn all 4 players before you start doing anything. It helps reduce lag. So to do the skip, you'll start off as player 1, the host, switch your controller number to 2, then close the PS menu so you can select guest and have them spawn. Then do the exact same thing for players 3 and 4. Once you've spawned the 4th player, you're going to change to the first player again, but don't select the number yet. You have to wait a couple of seconds for player 1 to despawn. There's an audio cue to let you know when that's happened. It sounds like this. Once they've despawned, select player 1 again, spawn them, and keep repeating the cycle. You'll have to wait for 2 more despawns after this, again for when you're spawning player 4 the second time, and once more when you spawn player 3 the third time. You can actually hold the X button while you're waiting. It only selects the option once you let go of the button on this menu. By this point, when you select player 3, they shouldn't spawn because all of the lives will have run out. Wait for the remaining player to despawn and select return to pod when the prompt comes up. There is a different method that saves a few seconds here that involves the player 5 option. After you've spawned player 4 for the first time, instead of then waiting for player 1 to despawn, you can select player 5 instead, staying within the PS menu, then select player 1 after you hear the despawn noise. Now that the introduction has been bypassed, there's a few cutscene skips we need to do to reach first steps, which involves a little more player switching. These cutscenes are painfully long, and if you miss the first skip, you'll have instantly lost around 10 seconds, and up to a full minute if you miss the second one. So if you don't have a lot of easy time save later in the run, it's probably best to reset and try again. Now for the cutscene skip. You'll want to pause the game as soon as you can, though you won't be able to until the narrator says the word first. It is possible to pause it on the first couple of frames while entering the pod as well. It saves a few seconds on top of that, so you may as well go for it. A good way to time it is to pause the game as soon as the lights on the checkpoint in the introduction have completely faded black. Just don't spam the pause button. It's very easy to unpause after you get it, which actually loses time because it'll extend the period from when you can pause next. Anyway, once it's paused, go into the PS menu to change your controller number. And as a reminder, you should be on controller number 3 at this point. Switch your controller number to controller 2, then once you've selected it, switch back to controller 3. Close the PS menu, and there'll be an option on the pause menu to return to the pod. Press this button, and you'll have skipped the first cutscene. The player that's actually being spawned here is the host player, and since the pause menu that's open is owned by a guest player, it's given the ability to return to their pod while still having control over it. The second cutscene is very similar to skip. This time you'll want to wait in front of the controller until the other Sackboy despawns. Once they're gone, you'll have access to the computer. Activate it, and another cutscene will play. Perform the exact same trick as last time with the pausing, switching to player 2, then 3, then pressing return to pod on the pause menu. Instead of waiting for the host player to despawn to use the computer, you can go back into the controller settings and switch to player 2. This will make you the host and you can use the pod computer immediately. From here, just spam X and you'll automatically select the gardens and then first steps. This applies for every other level as well. The game automatically selects the next level for you, so you can just keep pressing X without worrying about what you're selecting. Also, when levels are loading, you can actually pause the game during this sequence and it'll skip the entire zoom in animation and you'll be put straight into the level where you can unpause and then start playing. This saves about a second, and it can also disable dialogue boxes that are placed close enough to the entrance, which is pretty useful on Get a Grip and Burning Forest. Even though it can save time, it's a bad idea doing it on levels beyond the wedding, as certain levels after this point have a chance of completely crashing the game. The introduction segment is pretty much the only part of the game with this degree of menuing. There's a bit more later on, but it's not nearly as bad. So don't feel discouraged if you don't get it down straight away. The menuing here can be a bit clunky and confusing at first, but with enough practice, you'll become incredibly fluent with it. We hope to see you in the next video, where we'll be covering some actual gameplay and platforming in First Steps. See you next time.